Hello, we're going to speak about the way forward for safer pharmaceuticals and more details. I'm Emilio Benfenati, and I'm the head of the Department of Environmental Health Sciences of the Istituto di Ricerche Farmacologiche Mario Negri, Milan, Italy. And now, we're going to speak about safer and cleaner pharmaceuticals, and in particular, how to be proactive, how to anticipate and solve problems before they appear. We're speaking about One Health. So, all the different chemicals, all the different aspects associated with the consumption of resources have to be organized and managed jointly. And this is also related to each particular sector. This also regards pharmaceuticals, and so, the way to deal with pharmaceuticals have to be inserted within the same strategic concept of One Health. In particular, this means that when we are speaking about the impact of pharmaceuticals, we should evaluate. It is called life cycle assessment, LCA. And this means that, speaking about any chemical, any product, any article that we are consuming, including, of course, pharmaceutical, we should evaluate what is the input, the material, what kind of resources we are using to produce, for instance, pharmaceutical. They can be extracts from certain plants. Okay. So I need the plantation, I need the plant, and what is the impact of this kind of plantation of the original material which is used as the basis of the pharmaceutical compound? And then there will be a factory, an industry, producing, in practice, the pills. And this also will have an impact. I have to actually investigate and study, in particular, the process of manufacturing. Then the pills, the pharmaceuticals, have to be distributed, and there will be the use for instance, the human beings, or also the animals. In case of veterinary pharmaceuticals, they will use the pills of pharmaceuticals. And so there will be a waste from our use of pharmaceuticals, but actually waste here in this step in the process, waste also in this case, waste in the case of distribution, because the drug that they will be for each step, we have to be very precise and to measure, to evaluate the consequences of each phase in the life cycle assessment. This is the concept. And for instance, in the case of green chemistry and the synthesis of pharmaceuticals, we have evaluated in this paper the result of an important impact of the production of pharmaceuticals associated with the solvent. This can be easily understood that the pills, in terms of weight, are relatively small, but the amount of solvent is much larger, the solvent, which is used in the plant, in the industry to produce the pharmaceutical compound. And so, the choice of the solvent is very important. What different kinds of solvent, alcohol, ketones, etc. Some are acceptable, others are very risky, others are hazards. So, in principle, as much as possible, we should move toward water, which is, of course, the principle of the best solvent, and try to avoid other solvents and also reduce their amount and try to recover not dispersed, this kind of solvent. The impact, now we speak in particular, the impact on an ethical, toxicological, environmental point of view. For example, let's consider a situation in the UK. There are almost 2,000 substances, pharmaceutical compounds, active pharmaceutical ingredients, API, registered in the UK. But only about 10% of them have information regarding the environmental risk analysis. And considering the substances which are higher priority, so which will have a higher impact on, we have information only for 3% of these substances. So, as you can see, there's a lack of knowledge, lack of information regarding what can be the impact of the environment on the species, on the ecotoxicological point of view of pharmaceutical compounds that at a certain point will reach the environment. In particular, in the case of the practical toxicological evaluation, what can see the impact, for example, for the fish, animal species? We should use 1/3 of a million fish. This is a conservative assumption. In order to evaluate the pharmaceutical impact into the environment, considering the toxicity, but also by accumulations. So, this is a problem, a huge amount of fish to be used in order to get the experimental data regarding fish toxicity. But also, there are other problems, for instance, the laboratory which exists and which can be made in practice. These kinds of tests are not so many, and so, in practice, we could only evaluate 25 pharmaceuticals per year. And so, this will take many, many decades to evaluate all the pharmaceuticals which are used. So, as you can see, we have a lot of problems for a huge amount of animals, fish to be used. The time necessary to complete this test. The number of laboratories which are available worldwide. Nowadays we don't dare to think, okay, laboratories which are present in Europe, but in many cases, this is done out of Europe. And of course, the cost for this kind of experiment, and also ethical consideration before killing 1/3 fish to conduct the experiment. How pharmaceuticals are put on the market. This is at the end of a very long process, which lasts 5-10 years. So, it starts with a huge, maybe 1 million potential target substances. They do not exist, only their structure is evaluated in order to have the right structure for the target of interest regarding the therapeutic activity. In this case, we are speaking of this. And then, progressively, we focus our attention on this table and select a few substances. So, they prune, they eliminate more and more substances in certain tests, maybe on some compounds, 20-30, and other tests which are more expensive, and they are done with only a few chemicals. And then after these phases, which are done in the laboratory, the industry starts with preclinical studies, and clinical studies are done on human beings. So, this takes many, many years. A lot of people, a lot of reform sources, a lot of money to conduct this kind of study. And now within this premier project, which is funded by the European Commission and also by a pharmaceutical company, the question is the following. Should we proceed with this sequential process? Or maybe there's another perspective to proceed in a parallel way. Should we only focus initially on the human effort, a large number of chemicals, then focus, and then at the end introduce other tests for others, and only at the end take into account toxicity and the environmental aspect? Or maybe we combine all this line of evidence and we address all of them simultaneously. And this can also be beneficial in order to better evaluate human health. And we have to declare which are the priorities. Of course, human health is fundamental. So, this prevails, and we need a pharmaceutical compound which is effective from a therapeutic point of view. But let's imagine that there are two potential substances, one with higher environmental input, the other one with less input, of course. We can decide to choose the pharmaceutical compound with a lower input into the environment. And in this process, we can use computers. We are using computers within the premier structure in order to predict the properties, toxic properties, the environmental ecotoxicological properties of a pharmaceutical compound. We start with the molecular structure, so we don't need the physical compound. We are using computers. We calculate the number of descriptors for each substance. We evaluate statistically the performance of the model and in this way can aim to predict, for instance, fish toxicity. And indeed, we are developing some models, some in silicon model, the way they are called, using the computer in order to evaluate the fish toxicity. And the software is also able to evaluate the reliability. If a certain prediction is, if we can have a certain confidence in the prediction or not, if there is a level of uncertainty in this prediction. So, the overall lesson is that first of all, we should include all the steps of assessment in the process of drug design. And we should anticipate, as much as possible, all the critical aspects. This will be beneficial also from industry point of view in order to save money, in order to have a shorter period for this very long process. And in order to optimize the design of the new pharmaceutical to be put on the market, considering all the pros and cons simultaneously. Thank you for your attention.